This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider.
Oh, look at that! That's better, much better than mine's over here. Look.
Taking part in an archery lesson at an East London school earlier, Boris Johnson actually hit his target. He wasn't very far away from it. His new aim could be a bit harder to achieve. Every school open in September, every pupil back in class. Our editorial column thinks that's a worthy challenge, but wonders how the government will do it.
We cannot afford to deny young people a chance to shape their future, even as adults are allowed to flock to pubs and work out in gyms. So schools will come back and stay open, ministers insist, even if local lockdowns start to shut other places where people mix. But will they be safe? And what will school actually be like in an age of social distancing? Something that is mostly impossible to achieve if school sites take back their full number of children. More testing and clear rules will reassure many parents, but the government's determination to get schools open is not yet being matched by clarity about how they will work. With only weeks to go, basic questions still need to be answered.
Our Deputy Political Editor Nicholas Cecil is with me now. Nicholas, how does the government plan to get the schools open safely?
Well, today we learnt a bit more about the government's plan, and what is particularly interesting for London is how they want children to get to school. The Schools Minister, Nick Gibb, issued a direct plea to youngsters, their parents and staff as well, to teachers as well, to try to plan school journeys without using public transport. What the capital has is a particular problem that so many of us use public transport, that if you have schools all returning in September and also many more adults going back to work in September, then there's a danger that school buses and the tube get very crowded and then the virus starts spreading on the public transport system. So speaking to the Evening Standard, Mr. Gibbs said, "Plan now how you will get to school or college, and if it is possible for you to walk or cycle rather than getting the bus a few stops, please do."
There were lots of reassuring messages, I thought, from the Prime Minister today. He seems to be concerned that parents will be a bit too scared to send their children to school.
Yes, I think there's still a sizable minority of parents who are still concerned. The Evening Standard had an Ipsos Mori poll out last week, which showed 54% of adults think it's the right time to bring children back to school in September, but 32% think it is too early. If you listen to scientific experts, many of them think that if you look at a risk-benefit analysis, for children, going back to school is probably the right thing to do, because obviously they're missing out on lots of schooling at the moment, and also lots of social contact with their friends. There's a bigger question over the risk to the wider public from schools going back. The experts seem quite united on the fact that primary schools don't pose a big risk of leading to a surge in infections. But the issue surrounding secondary schools is a slightly different degree of concern. And here the experts seem to disagree slightly. Certainly this morning we had Professor Russell Viner, who's the president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. He was saying that it's increasingly clear that older children, teenagers, probably do transmit the virus as much as adults, but that schools themselves play very little role in that. Last week, though, we had Professor Neil Ferguson, and he drew up one of the key reports which led to the lockdown in the first place. And he was warning that if secondary schools all return, it can actually push up the R rate of infection by between 0.2 and 0.5, which is quite a sizable increase towards if you're looking at 0.5.
And that's that kind of confusing message which has put a lot of people off throughout this pandemic, Nicholas. One thing that is very clear, though, is that this academic year has been pretty much shattered by the coronavirus and its restrictions have followed it. With the A-level results coming out on Thursday, I think a lot of people are going to be seeing just how much disruption has been caused.
Yes, well, this morning we had in Scotland Nicholas Sturgeon apologising for the way that they've dealt with the exams up there, admitting that lots of pupils had been treated unfairly. And so everyone will be watching what happens on Thursday in England to see whether that is repeated. And in terms of the next academic year, what everyone seems to agree on is that basically for schools all to be able to go back safely, one thing that does need to improve is the test, track and isolate system, which experts say is just not good enough at the moment. It really needs to improve. And one other possibility, the Health Minister, Helen Whately, this morning, she wouldn't rule out that you can actually have regular testing in schools, which might reassure quite a few parents. She said that the government's scientific and medical advisors weren't advising that, quotes, at the moment, but so that still is a possibility that might happen.